It has been quite the summer. Not a great one if you ask me. But the other day, I was feeling a little sad, wanted to do some retail therapy, and I went to Michael's and found these gessoed panels. Never used them before, but I wanted to give them a shot. But not only that, I found these on sale too. These so flat, matte, fluid golden acrylics. I have heard people talk about these and how they are similar to like regular gouache or acrylic gouache. Now, I'm not too familiar with either, but I really wanted to give this a chance because I think this was only like 25 bucks. And I think one of those little jars alone is like 8 bucks. So I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So I got my water, my paint pad, but one thing I did make a mistake was use this paper palette. I would not recommend using a paper palette. These are very viscous and they are runny. So I would definitely recommend getting like an actual palette that holds each and every color. Also, I could tell that these were pigmented. A little bit got on my hands when I was pouring these, and I could tell these are pretty good quality. I am not sponsored, by the way. This is not sponsored. This is my reference photo, and I wanted to transform this. It's a selfie, but I wanted to transform this reference photo into something very, very different. I was kind of given the vibes of Gustav Klimt with the angle, so I think that's kind of what I was leading into. Now, I can't remember the last time I actually used acrylic paint for a full-on painting. It has at least been like a couple years, but I've used acrylic paint when it comes to like sculptures and stuff like that, but not like a full-on painting. So I was a little out of my element. One of the things that I wanted to make really prominent was the shadow. I wanted the shadow to be very dramatic. One thing about these matte acrylics, and honestly acrylics just in general, is that they dry a little darker, but if they are matte, they also dry slightly desaturated and also not as dark. You don't get that depth. I hope this is making sense. I mean, all in all, I just want that richness that you don't really get with acrylic. However, there are ways to achieve, similar depth and richness, like doing washes or using, a very heavy, thick paint. Like heavy body paint is usually always glossy. And I'm mainly talking about acrylic paint, like heavy body Liquitex or even golden, like heavy body. Most of the time, it's gonna be a glossy paint. And I feel like those paints do mimic oil paint pretty well, but just not it completely. Does that make it like it doesn't reach it to its fullest extent? Anyways, the reason why I mention all this is because when I wanted that shadow to be very prominent, it almost was like I was battling this paint because it was going from dark to light, dark to light. When it was wet, it was dark. When it was dry, it was light. Does that make sense? It was struggling. It was I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I had to get over this learning curve once again. I've been using acrylic paint since I learned how to paint when I was a little kid. I know how to use acrylic paint. You just kind of forget because I've been using oil-based products for so long. In all honesty, this paint did not feel or act different than like a regular craft paint that's like 99 cents a tube. Does that make sense? This was the paint was viscous and it was very pigmented. I will say that some of those little craft cheap paints can be very streaky and like almost translucent, but these were very opaque, very nice. But for like the difference in cost and also the manufacturer is a very, high quality brand, I was expecting like the juiciness to be overflowing, but it was not that different. Okay, I'll say they were different. They glided across the canvas a lot easier. They were also, like I said, very pigmented, opaque, and you don't really get that with the craft paint. But I was expecting, with the difference of brand and how high quality this paint is, like to be astronomical, and it was nothing of the sort. Damn, this is turning out to be more of like a review on these paints. Listen, these paints are amazing. I've seen people do amazing things with these paints. This is not really a review on these paints. Well, I might turn it into a review. It depends on how well this video does, to be honest. Anyways, what am I trying? I guess, where am I going with this? Well, damn. Maybe I'll just let y'all watch for a little bit. You remember when I mentioned Gustav Klimt and how I kind of wanted that vibe for this? Do you see the vision? Do you see the vision? So at this point, I was like, oh, I should transform this a little bit more. But something was up with the face. Just like my experience with gouache, when you add too much white, actually, this is with almost every single type of paint. You add too much white, everything can look very ashy and just dull and not saturated and pale. And I feel like people forget that you can do glazes with acrylic paint. You just adding water and paint instead of, a medium and paint. And honestly, sometimes acrylic needs it a lot more because you run into these problems of dullness and not having that richness that oil paint usually does. But to make a long story short, that's exactly what I ended up doing with this portrait. Throughout the entire portrait, as a matter of fact, I just did these light washes or glazes, whatever you want to call them, just to warm the portrait back up because they were a little washed out. Oh, when I was struggling with this shadow, I wanted it to be dark, but then I was like, oh, if I make it too dark, it might mess up the contrast of the face. But I ended up making that shadow, that green shadow you see right there. I ended up making that really dark and really saturated, which then made me realize that this kind of makes it look like someone's floating in the water. Doesn't it look like, do you see how I darkened that up a little bit? And now it looks like this person is in the water kind of floating on the surface. Oh, I loved it. Oh, I'll let y'all watch for a little bit. This shoulder was a little hard to do because I didn't have a reference photo for the exact lighting of this pose, but I gave it my all. I kind of guessed where the bones would be and stuff. And after I added a few more highlights in the face, I realized I needed to go in with another wash or another glaze. Do you see the difference? I added a little bit more reds and warmer tones. Now, this is the part where I feel like I went a little too heavy, a little too overboard with the green, with the saturation of that shadow. I think I lost it. I think I lost a little bit of that charm that it used to have, but it did give it some pop, if you know what I'm saying. And here's me adding just a little bit more of this black and just to redefine some of this contrast because I lost a lot of it in the hair. Now, was this fun to make? Absolutely. Did I learn a lot? Yeah. Would I switch over to acrylic full time? Absolutely not. I miss my oil after this, but I will be doing a lot more acrylic because I finish this pretty quickly. And that's not always something you can say with oil paint. Oh, and let me show you what it looks like in its frame. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, please let me know down below. If you have any suggestions on what I should do next, also let me know down below. I'll see y'all in the next video.